But before I do, I have some words from Krista Tippett's Ware lecture from 2016. In it she says, "In American civic life, instinctively, we mostly trade in answers, and we trade in competing answers. Or we trade in questions which aren't questions at all, but tools or even weapons meant to catch, corner, incite, or at least entertain." I know that when I said that, we all immediately had 100 images of those kinds of questions we've heard, those kinds of exchanges in our minds. But in that ever-present spectacle, there is a truth I'd also invite you to notice and ponder. And that is what a powerful thing a question is. A question is a mighty form of words. Here is how I've learned to experience it. Questions elicit answers in their likeness. Answers mirror the questions they rise or fall to meet. It turns out it's not true what they taught us in school. There is such a thing as a bad question. I've struggled with this, but I've finally decided it's true. It is often true that a simple, honest question is precisely what's needed to drive to the heart of a matter. That remains as true as ever. But it is hard to meet a simplistic question with anything but a simplistic answer. It's hard, almost impossible, to transcend a combative answer, a combative question. But I can state this positively. It is hard to resist a generous question. And we can all formulate questions that invite honesty, dignity, and revelation. There's something redemptive and life-giving about asking a better question. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you from the floor to ask your question that I will answer. But before we do that, I was asked 3 questions last week by one of our members or friends who is not here today. But her questions were to tell the story of my call, to talk about my purpose, I think that was the second one, and the last one is where do I see myself in 5 years? So to answer the first question, what is my call? When did I experience my call? What is my call story? I grew up unchurched. I am fairly certain that my parents are still asking what went wrong with their child producer. But I grew up unchurched and in a secular home. And so I had no experience of a calling. I'd meet with people and they'd be like, oh, I was called when I was 4 years old, but I was a woman, so I couldn't in my denomination or whatever, right? They've got like all these really great call stories. Mine was that I was called from my congregation. I felt a calling to some degree within, but I was asked over and over and over again in my home congregation, when are you going to seminary? You should be a minister. And so that is my story. And everything that I have done, my ordination service since then, every milestone for me has been about that conversation of, I don't think a calling is a one-time thing. I think it's a conversation. And for me, I hear that conversation from the people that I serve. The second question, I think, was what is my purpose in this congregation? Or what do I see as my purpose in this congregation? Something along those lines. And I keep coming back to one of the stories that I told and services that I did very early in my time with this congregation, and this congregation as a sibling congregation that it's yoked with up in Summerfield. And I told both of you, my hope is that I can help you be the best you that you can be. And that remains my call in doing congregational ministry. And the question of where do I see myself in 5 years? I have never liked this question. It's just not, I know that there are people in this world that like do things and they have, like ideas about, like in a path. And at this point, I just want to be serving faithfully. I'm hoping that I will get to continue in this ministry that I have with this congregation and the other congregation for some time, but we'll see what happens. And I'll decide as I go along what that looks like. But those were her 5 questions, so I wanted to honor them. And I have another one up here that was left for me that is not signed, So I want to address this. I'm curious why we are read a children's book every Sunday. Perhaps this is a communications technique recommended by the UUA or Meadville Lombard Theological School. I wonder if this is the best way to communicate with a congregation of mostly college-educated adults 70 or older. I feel it implies that we are not capable of understanding concepts such as joy, hope, love, or whatever unless it is presented in simple terms, which I find offensive. I suspect the UUA is mandating its ministers to use this technique as all of the substitute people we had in the pulpit did the same. Do you have any wiggle room in selecting the book, or does that come down from the UUA headquarters as well? So, no, the UUA has other things to do other than mandate what we do in worship. I choose the books every week. I think that storytelling is important. I've said before, and I will say always, we are meaning-seeking, meaning-making, storytelling people. And if children's stories aren't your thing, I mean, that's fine. It doesn't have to be your thing. But I find that it's helpful for a lot of people to hear stories. It helps them connect better with the rest of the service. It's a gentle way to ease into worship. People have, I mean, like I know all of us do a lot of sitting, right? But it's hard to like just center yourself, right? You don't just sit and be like, okay, I'm ready to receive whatever. Like it's a nice way to ease into worship. I also will reflect that I have been told at times that this congregation is wanting to be a multi-generational congregation, and one of the ways that we do multi-generational ministries is to tell stories. And the last thing I will say about that is that I'm not sure there's any service element that I receive as many compliments for as I do for the stories that I tell. It is a very popular part of the service, and I have provided many a Christmas list for people, for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, and they appreciate that opportunity to have a story that connects outside of their lives as well. If it feels like it's an insular thing for here, people are taking these stories and they're carrying them out into their lives. So that's my answer for that. All right, who else has questions?
How do you define leadership? How do you see leadership in the role that you're in? The question was, how does Reverend Kristina see leadership in the position that she is in?
To me, leadership is making the people around you and the institutions that we serve the best that they can be, or at least better. I think that's the entire point of being a leader. Sometimes people think that, like, you know, I don't know, we get this idea of like from like CEOs and like leadership is supposed to look very slick and whatever, but like leadership is not just that. I mean, maybe that's a part of it, but leadership is also being willing to look at an institution and hold up things that it's doing great, and to look at the challenges and to try to help those rise as well, so that everything is getting better, more across the board, and also making hard decisions. Sometimes realizing that, you know, this thing that we really want to do well, be wonderful and exciting, it needs to be retired. It needs to you know, be composted into something else. So to me, leadership is all of those things. I keep thinking there's someone in the library, but it's your reflection on the windows.
I'm just going to carry forward with the discussion we had in the adult group this morning. And this is strictly my opinion. I'm not speaking for anyone else. I have a little bit of a concern because I've been here not even 2 years. And I feel like the church is going in a different direction. It seems as though we are losing any element of spirituality here and getting more and more political. My son, who is, as an outsider, very astute and has studied religion all over the world and traveled, said he felt as if this was not a church, that it was a political organization, because that's all he heard while he was here. And I happen to agree with him in a lot of respects. We have a few little things that I feel are still spiritual. The stone ritual, maybe the meditation, although it's not my thing. A lot of people feel that it is. But it just feels as though when I leave here, I feel no different from when I came in, other than maybe a little frustration. Because I feel as though church should be something that you're getting some comfort out of. I can't find comfort when all I hear every week is politically charged comments about capitalists and about things that are, to me, don't have a place here. I know we are a different type of church, but it just seems as though we're going in that direction, and that bothers to me. Because yes, I do have a different tack on things, because I'm a pagan. I'm a druid. I don't expect you to be up there holding rituals to more you. But it seems as though it should, maybe we're getting a little too secular. Just my question.
Are you feeling that across the board or just in worship?
I find it, I feel it in the coffee hour as well, in the adult discussion. If that is the direction we're going in.
Okay, well, so for my own part, I have a very small, like, I can't fix a lot, I can fix worship. And I will reflect back to you that in the past you have told me on more than one occasion that you have found the worship services to be helpful. So if I have gone on a different trajectory since then, I haven't been here the whole time, but if we've gone on a different trajectory since then, I can try and write that train. But as far as the adult conversations and coffee hour goes, I'm not really sure how to address that, but we will see what we can figure out. One of the hard things is that, I have ideas for providing some direction for some things, but also it's not something that I can control. For one thing, I'm not here. But for another thing, it's all of you have to be in agreement together about how to do that. And so, yeah.
Is this supposed to be a discussion?
It's a Q&A.
Okay. Well, I don't really have a question. I want to express my gratitude for the spiritual element that I feel and that I receive. And I think we're all from different backgrounds. So it's all, it's like the story of the men and the blind men and the elephant. We all feel something different, and I just feel like I'm grateful that there's a balance in you that you recognize the reality of what's going on in the world, and you frame it. For me, it's very helpful, and I feel like it's you help me to understand the problems of the world, and I'm very grateful for the spirituality that the spiritual element that I receive when I'm here. And I think that the presentations are different, throughout the year. You have different speakers, from different backgrounds and traditions. And so it's sort of a kaleidoscope, and I appreciate it.
Bernie and then Frida.
I would like to say how much I appreciate you telling the stories you do, especially at the beginning, because that I find to be very spiritual.
How we do this.
I'm interested to know what was your take on the spiritual element of UUA this year. It's easy to figure out the organizational slant and other stuff, but what was the meat of the matter? What did you take away from it, spiritually, I mean?
I feel like one of the things that felt really good for me this year. So I'm going to complexify the question and make it my own. So somebody recently asked me about Unitarian Universalism and how we understand ourselves, and I say that Unitarian Universalists have come out of Christian traditions, but we are no longer bound by them. And by that, I mean that we welcome people of all sorts of different religious traditions, faith, backgrounds, and we invite them to come in wherever they are, however they are in relationship with their background, if they're holding it tightly, if they're holding it very loosely, if they have tried to send it away in the wind. We welcome all of that to be here. And what I understand Unitarian Universalism to be right at this moment, just as it took several hundred years for Christianity to more or less self-differentiate from Judaism, we are also in that process. We have come out of Christian traditions and we are no longer bound by them. And we are kind of figuring out who we are and who we want to be when we are a little bit more mature, right? And the thing that I took out of General Assembly this year is that I feel like we're really getting into doing some of that work and trying to figure out what it means to be Unitarian Universalist. That does not necessarily mean that we are holding on to Christianity tightly the way that we may have during the merger. I mean, in 1961, both parts of the denomination were still kind of holding Christianity fairly tightly. And we are not anymore. And so it's fascinating for me to witness this process of emergence of our own faith. So that's what I was excited about.
How many more would you like?
Maybe one?
I want to go back to your bio where you said that your congregation asked you, but you started out by saying you were unchurched. So yes. I want to go back to how did you get to a congregation in the first place?
Okay, that is a really long story.
Because that was somewhat of a calling.
Yeah. Okay, so I grew up unchurched. I am from Cleveland, and if most people don't really know much about Cleveland, but Cleveland is a very diverse place. And so my best friends from middle school on were Jewish, and I also had close friends who were Christian and Buddhist. And I loved reading about different religions and faith traditions, and it was always like, it's so interesting how people believe this stuff. Like, it's just interesting the different beliefs that we have and how we got to those beliefs, and like everything, right? It's so interesting, but like also didn't resonate for me. So it was always very kind of like, it's so interesting how people enjoy this, but also like over here. And I went through a number of experiences and through my teens and through college and grad school and college and grad school. And one thing that happened was I went to Russia for study abroad, so I was gone for a semester there. And I remember being in the churches, and of course Russians are Orthodox, and they have icons everywhere. And like it was very weird for me the only time we went to church when I was growing up was Christmas Eve and occasionally on Easter, and the Easter church was not the same as the Christmas Eve church. But they were Presbyterian mostly, and so like very austere, and like there's not a lot of anything around. So I'm in these churches in Russia, and there's like all these literally eyes, because they're icons looking at you, and it's very, very like, I don't know, it felt a little disconcerting, but also kind of welcoming. And after I came back, I just started to have more experiences and recognized that I was feeling called to a spiritual community. I needed something that would answer my heart's longing, that wasn't being met by other organizations and other work that I was doing. And I had a friend whose sister was a retired Unitarian Universalist minister, and he was like, you should really go to a UU church if you want a spiritual community. And I was, and my sister got married by a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I was like, this is such a lovely service. He didn't talk about God or Jesus once. And just like this stuff was happening, right? And he just kept saying, I think you should, they're your people, they're your people. And I went and they're my people. So that's how I got to church. Yeah. One more. Terry. Is it quick?
Yeah, well, okay, so,
The mic has been turned off, so I'm loud.
okay, I have a loud voice. So, I want to know, is it possible to discuss other religions? In other words, you're talking about all these other religions, but what I would like to know is, how do we align with some of their principles? Are there some things that they have in their religion that we can learn from? And we're supposed to be all-inclusive, but I mean, I would like to hear a little bit more about, well, even Jesus with the parables, or the Buddhists, how they believe, and so we're taking some of that from them, or vice versa. With all these a lot of religions out there, and it'd be nice to be more informed about how we relate and can learn from them as well.
So the question for everybody who couldn't hear it was basically how do we understand ourselves to be in relationship with other faith traditions like Buddhism or Islam or Judaism and Christianity and paganism and all of those kinds of things, and how do we know ourselves to be in relationship with those others, and how can we learn to draw wisdom from them? I am not comfortable personally sharing a lot about traditions that I don't have a strong relationship with. So I do have experience with Judaism, I do have experience with Christianity, I do have experience with atheism or humanism, and I do have experience with different traditions. Again, I did not grow up in a church, so I cannot tell you the differences between Calvinism, Lutheranism, Methodism, or anything else. It's always a surprise to me, and the names don't stick because they don't mean anything to me because I haven't been in a relationship with them. That being said, I've had a lot of experiences with different people, and that's usually how I've learned about different things. I had a Muslim roommate for 2 years, so I know all about where to go and buy halal meat outside of Kent, Ohio, because we would go to the market on a regular basis, so that we could have that for her. So yeah, I mean, like there are things that we can talk about, but also it's hard when it's not something that I'm actually in enough relationship with. So I mean, if there are people that are in enough relationship with something that you want to talk about it, there's an invitation. We'd be happy to have you in the pulpit sometime.
Or in a discussion group, or in
Yeah, absolutely. Discussion group, class, invite people to have team speakers. Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of ways to do that, but I'm not enough of an authority on other traditions to be able to speak for them. All right, So that is the end. We've run a little bit over. But if you would please rise and lift your voice in song with me for our closing hymn, just as long as I have breath.